Hey, this is Matt Ertz, the Madison County historian. We are still working to document the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, and today we are speaking with the Reverend Bryant Clark of Park United Methodist Church in Hamilton. Reverend Clark, thank you for being here today.
Absolutely.
So for those that aren't familiar, talk a little bit about Park United Methodist Church.
So Park United Methodist Church just recently celebrated their bicentennial this past year. So it's a church that has been in Hamilton for quite some time. We are part of what is called the Reconciling Churches in or the Reconciling Ministry Network in the United Methodist Church, meaning that we are a church that is attempting to reconcile with all of those communities that the church has hurt or oppressed or left out in its existence. And we believe this is God's work, and that it speaks to the truth of the gospel of inclusion and things like that. And so we're really sort of just in the advent of that. It's sort of an exciting time to pass a milestone of 200 years, and yet to be starting something very new in our community. So it's so we're sort of at a transition moment and a milestone moment at the same time. So it's a really exciting time to be part of this ministry.
Wonderful. And we have a number of churches. Hamilton specifically has a number of churches, but across the county that have had very long legacies of serving their local communities. And in a time like this, they're probably more important than ever. So talk a little bit about when COVID-19 first appeared on your church's radar.
Yeah, so it was in March. I think it was the second Sunday of March is when, like, I would say about half of our Methodist churches decided they weren't going to meet in worship, and half of us decided that we were. And we decided at our church that we would hold service. The way that I was thinking of it was, we're all adults. If you feel like you should stay home, stay home. And I made that very clear to everybody, because, we were really just getting to know what this crisis was going to be about, or was it a big deal or not? Nobody really knew back then. But we knew a little bit about the virus, obviously. And I just remember all of the wrong people showed up that Sunday, that we were kind of on the fence. Should we meet? Shouldn't we? And as soon as we saw who walked in the building, I was like, oh no, because it was some of our oldest members or folk that had been sick recently and things, people that were at risk, but were so loyal to the church. And so it was in that moment that I knew we would have to be doing things pretty different from here on out. And of course, over time, we realized that this was going to be a long-standing situation. We converted our worship services online, which of course was a big learning curve for a lot of us, myself included. But it's been a really wholesome time, and at the same rate, it's obviously been challenging in different ways, but it's been a real opportunity to sort of prove to one another, sort of kind of a put your money where your mouth is kind of thing. Probably for the past generation or so, the church, at least in the Methodist Church, we've done a lot of talking about how, the church isn't just a building. We're not just, religious social clubs, we're people that need to get out into the community, and the church is the people, and it's not the gathering space. And there's more to making church happen than, making sure that the roof doesn't leak and things like that. And so it's been a really incredible journey so far to see, with all the very obvious need that is all around us in so many ways. It's been a real challenge in the best way, a challenge to us to get outside of the church, to meet the needs of the people that surround our community, and really just to kind of get out of our own way, or get out of the Spirit's way, we might say, to instead of worrying about all those things that, we can get bogged down in the details of what it takes to run a church, and really kind of almost get back to basics of meeting people where they are, and being a helpful hand in the name of Christ, and just really having to rethink and reorganize and reprioritize, what does it mean to be the church, and what is it that we're called to do in moments like these.
Okay. Um, yeah, one of the other ministers, you referenced it a little, talked about he had to come to this belief of the building is a tool for us to do our work. It is not the only tool we have. And he goes, I've had to break into my toolkit and remember how to use some other tools, but it's a great way to put it. So Hamilton was one of the first places hit. There was a basketball game and that probably played into it a little bit. Talk about, in that moment in time, I know the ministers across the churches in Hamilton came together and you started working with Community Hospital, but talk about within your church, was there any direct impact there or, talk about that.
Yeah, thanks. So, in our community specifically, we haven't been impacted in the sense that one of our regular churchgoers contracted. Well, I guess I take that back. There was one woman who did test positive. Fortunately, she did not have very serious symptoms and was able to kind of just be under quarantine and that kind of thing. There were several people that had family members that were affected, even a few that lost family members, cousins and aunts and things like that. So, that was difficult. And in the same vein, there were people in the church that did pass away, not necessarily COVID related.
Right.
And that was especially difficult, because in times of grief, like the way that we all of our like instincts of like, what should I do? I should, let's, take someone a meal or, take them out to lunch or give them a big hug or, like these are all wrong. And so, yeah, just like the building, we had to really start to rethink, how is it that we care for each other? How is it that we care for the community when we are in this territory we've never really been in. But even that has been fruitful. I was very privileged to preside over a funeral service that was one of the most moving, meaningful services I've ever been a part of. And it was just a few of us outside at the graveside. And we told stories, and it was, much more informal than your typical funeral service would be. But it was really, really touching. And I kind of wonder that, moments like that, would that have felt so much different, for better or for worse, if we were sort of under normal circumstances. So it's been a real interesting thing to see how even in the challenging moments, God seems to really still shine a light on the opportunity and give new grace to us to work in new ways too.
Okay. Talk about adapting on the fly. So you said you have your mass. I think it was March 8th was the Sunday. March 11th was the day a lot of people point to. That's the day the NBA shut down. That's the day Tom Hanks announced that he had it. So for a lot of people, it got very real, very fast. I think the following Monday, which would have been the 16th, Madison County announced that the governor announced everybody was going to 50% capacity. And by the end of that week, we had closed. So talk a little bit about, I don't know how technology driven you are. We've all learned how to use Zoom. But talk a little bit about that adaptation on the fly. You referenced a little bit helping people with the grieving process, but figuring out how to do mass online, figuring out how to still maintain contact with your parishioners in a moment where you can't have physical contact.
So I'll speak sort of from a personal level first. When you're a pastor, you're very much the head of a community. No matter what room you're sitting in, no matter if you preface whatever you're about to say with, I'm not the expert, or that's the expert over there, like you're still in charge. And so it's a unique experience, really whatever's going on, because whether they realize it or not, your parishioners, your church community is going to look to you for guidance as far as what's the tone we're setting, what are our priorities, what are our values, and that kind of thing. And so I was very aware that it would be sort of on me to lead the way. Certainly I got a lot of help, and in the Methodist church, of course, we're a connectional church. So I leaned on my colleagues quite a bit. What are you doing over there? How are you going about this? And so there was a lot of like hive mind kind of things going on, which was a real blessing. And what I did immediately was we started working with our church Facebook page, which was something that we already had. And so it was sort of like a good place to start. At the beginning of the pandemic, and for the first 2 months of it, 5 days a week, I would do some sort of video that I would make, some kind of devotional or a prayer or something. And at the beginning of our time, it was very like spiritual. There was like candles, it was dark. It was kind of a like, Lord, help us through the night kind of stuff, because that's what I anticipated we needed. It was scary. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't know how bad it would get. All we knew was like, this is serious. And so I knew that my job would be to at least remind my people about sort of the confidence that our tradition gives us in times where we don't know what comes next, in times where we do feel like there is a night that we're not sure if we'll see a daylight after, and that kind of thing. And then over time, those videos and different online things became really a great tool. Again, we use the word tool, right? To reach either people that we hadn't seen in church for a while, or new people. It was a great way, again, right? It's when the church feels like a club, it can be intimidating to say to your friend or your neighbor, like, hey, I'm part of this club called church and you should come check it out. And it'll feel weird, but it's a very easy thing though, to just send somebody a link or say like, hey, check out this devotion my pastor did, or here's a meme that talks about the mission project that we're going to do at our church. You should swing by, or, that kind of thing. So in a very real way, it helped us to kind of take that step that we probably should have taken, 20 years ago into the internet age and that kind of thing. And so it's been funny, it's a different type of connection than we're used to, but there is a lot of opportunity there too. And so not to say that I'm grateful that there's a pandemic and that there's suffering in the world, but in the midst of this, there has been good that has come from it, or at least we've learned a lot. If nothing else. And so that's been something that I've been grateful for just through this process.
Talk a little bit about, we're now 3 months into this. And while New York is doing better, other places aren't. We know right in this moment in time, today is June 25th. See, we don't even know the dates anymore. Today is June 25th, and Florida and Texas, I have a sister in Texas, and Arizona are all seeing significant spikes. Are you having conversations with folks from other areas just because you've kind of gone through this already?
Certainly not in terms of being an expert.
No.
But it has been interesting to me, part of my generation being a millennial, I'm only I'm only 3 years out of seminary. And so I'm still very closely connected to a lot of my peers that, of course, we all spread out all over all over the globe, really. And so it's really less about, I've been through this before, whatever, but it's been really interesting to kind of touch base with everybody. I have a friend who's a chaplain in the Navy, and he's stationed in Okinawa right now. And so what's going on over there? And, are you, like, do you have to wear masks? And, just kind of comparing notes. And when this first came out, I had a colleague that lives in Seattle, which of course, in Washington, they had a huge outbreak there to start. And so, it's been really interesting to kind of compare notes with everybody, and just kind of check in that way, or just keep track of people, through social media and stuff. And it's weird because, we're all in the same boat, but everybody interacts with it a little different. Every region is interacting a little different.
Right.
So it's, we're just kind of waiting and seeing what works. And yeah.
Okay. So when we started this, everyone was kind of on a stay-at-home order. Obviously, Memorial Day changed a lot of things with the George Floyd murder. You have taken part, Madison County, or excuse me, the Village of Hamilton had a Black Lives Matter protest on June 4th and June 6th, which you took part, I know in the June 4th one, I think the June 6th one as well.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about that process and what moved you to take part in this at a time when, you know, your church wasn't meeting, but you felt like a lot of us did, this was the thing to bring us out. And I was at the June 6th one. But talk a little bit about what brought you out and why that was important to you.
Good question. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's such a good question. I guess I'll start. I think it's related to the pandemic, actually, and I'm not a sociologist. You know, I don't know how
Neither
this
am I.
right. Yeah, but I just, well, let me start here with the pandemic. Again, it's that put your money where your mouth is thing for churches. And part of that was, to me at least, the way that I sort of theologize this moment is the entire world, save maybe a couple of small groups here and there, the entire world did a very, like, dare I say, like, Christian thing. And, like, instead of valuing money and economies and, you know, our own families or our own comfort, we shut everything down and we all started wearing masks for the sake of each other and for the sake of strangers literally on the other side of the globe that we would never meet. And so to me, that was a very hopeful and inspiring thing. And it was also something that brought me a lot of disappointment because a lot of my colleagues, not so much in the Methodist Church, and I'm sure there was plenty in the Methodist Church, but a lot of my Christian colleagues were very resistant to that movement in ways that I think were very selfish. They wanted to worship in their buildings and they weren't going to let anybody tell them that they couldn't. And they didn't really seem to care that it was a risk. And to me, that's a real, I guess, sort of historical demerit on the church, that many of us failed to rise to the moment for the sake of other people that weren't in our little church club. And so sort of carrying the optimism of half of that and the disappointment with the other half of that, you know, when we're coming together as a people, at least becoming more aware of this moment. Now, I went to a seminary that was very social justice minded. And so to me, it was like answered prayer. It's difficult. You know, things always feel different than you expect them to, but, like, you know, the world was waking up to a problem. The white world, I should say, was waking up to a problem that was prevalent, that was so obvious, and it's so, like, unforgivable that it took us so long to get there, to speak out, to listen, again, to prioritize people that weren't us. And so to me, it was a no-brainer. I didn't have to think about it. You know, of course, it was a risk, and it's a risk that I didn't take lightly. But it was, you know, if people are marching in the street about the value and dignity of all people, especially those that are oppressed, that have been put down and left out, if the church isn't in lockstep with those people that are advocating and bringing voice and highlighting voices that aren't usually highlighted, then we've completely, you know, misunderstood our calling as Christians. And so, you know, I don't think it's a coincidence that it was the church that, you know, was a huge instrument to the civil rights movement. The church, of course, like I kind of hinted at the beginning of our conversation, has also done a lot of damage to people of color over the centuries, especially in this country. And so we have work to do as the church to own up to our shortcomings, and do so in a way that allows healing to be possible. not in the sense that we need to do this so that we get forgiven and we feel better about ourselves, but in the sense that we need to do true repentance, which means so much more than just being sorry for something. It means making a real change in your life, to make sure that those patterns don't continue. And so for me, I was really, really pleased to see Hamilton, which is a community of privilege, to come and sort of surround this moment, and have my my ecumenical colleagues from town. We published a statement that committed us to anti-racist work, and I was really proud that we were able to do that. And my prayer is that that work continues, that the momentum continues, that all those people that have committed to advocacy in some sense will continue to do that. And that's not just like as an American or as any other hat, but really as a Christian. I just really, really pray that this is the start of something, and not just like another sort of like hopscotch moment of,
it does feel different.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's unique to Madison County, Hamilton, is we are home to the National Abolition Hall of Fame and Museum in Peterborough. We were home to the first meeting of the New York State Anti-Slavery Society in 1835. After they were thrown out of a Presbyterian church in Utica. I think it was Presbyterian. Either way, that's not the point of it. They were thrown out of a church because there was fear at that point in time of what they were. And it became this big thing, and it's part of our identity in Madison County, of helping those less fortunate. The last thing I will end with is how you think, for all of this, how you think the COVID pandemic, this movement, the Black Lives Matters movement, is going to impact us moving forward. Beyond the easy things of we all now know how to wash our hands. How else do you think this is going to bring people back to your church? Do you think it's going to, what changes could you see forthcoming?
I did a whole series in my videos, and I think in my sermons too, earlier in the pandemic, about thinking of this not so much as a shutdown, but as a pause. And like, what does it mean that the whole world is collectively taking a breath, skipping a beat, giving us time to think. I encourage my folk to decide, the world's going to open back up again. And now it's really easy to say, oh, I should spend more time with my kids, or I should worry less about this or whatever. But so I encourage folk, decide now who you want to be when you get there, right? Like when everything opens back up, it's already too late to think about it. So think about it now, make a commitment now. And I think I still hold some of that, I wondered aloud in my community of faith about what if we're not supposed to go back to normal? Maybe this is sort of a God moment and a gut check on a lot of things. And just to name it, I was very self-centered in the sense of I was thinking about my church. I was thinking about my meeting schedule. I was thinking about, my middle-class white American culture. And what I think the Black Lives Matter movement in this moment has helped at least me to realize is that this moment should be a gut check, and something that gives us pause about much more than just how many hours we work in a week or how much time we spend with our kids, but what are we working for? What are we talking about when we talk to our kids and we spend time with them? And so I don't know. I'm usually a very optimistic person. I've seen a lot in the past years in our country, and I studied history in undergrad. And so like I kind of know too much to be too optimistic here. But as a person of faith, though, I think it demands a certain optimism, or at least a certain hope. And so very much I hope that if nothing else, we will have recognized as humanity how connected we are, how interconnected our culture is to other cultures, countries to other countries, how important it is that our lives are not the only lives that matter. Our country is not the only country that matters. Like, it matters how we interact, and it matters whether or not we listen to each other and care for each other and look out for each other. And so I don't know what that means. I don't have any like concrete hopes, like, oh, we'll get universal healthcare or something. But I really do hope that this moment will be something that we remember. Well, I'll put it like this. It's like, how we all remember 9/11,
Yeah.
right? Like, everybody knows where they were and whatever.
Economics class.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Everybody's got a story. And so on the one hand, I think that was a traumatic day for us, and it was really awful. And sometimes we remember some good things, like we were all patriotic, and like for like all of, I don't know, 3 months, we were all Americans and we weren't, whatever. But at the end of the day, that was trauma. That's how we remember that. It led to more trauma. It was awful. And we all remember that. All of us will remember this shutdown for the rest of our lives. And I pray that we don't just remember it as like, oh, LOL, remember that one time that, like, oh, kids, when I was your age, like everything stopped working for a year. Like, okay, it's cute, whatever. But like, what if we remembered all the lessons we learned, all the things we saw? What if we remembered, how interconnected we realized we were, or who we were overlooking, and these different things that we've named. So that's my biggest hope, I guess, is that we don't forget about this moment, the depth of this moment. Yeah.
I can think of no better way to end our conversation than with that. I hope we remember it too, and not just because I'm recording these videos, but more so, I hope that we remember not the shenanigans that took place during this, but the humanity that came during this, and all the people that rallied and did simple things that we have not done. We're helping our food pantries more. The folks that put together food drives and dairy drives and potato drives, and the folks that delivered stuff for folks that couldn't get out. All those things that, all the face masks that have been sewn by so many people. And as silly as it sounds, the fact that people listened, which, how often do we forget to just shush and listen to someone, and how much that can help people in the moment in time. And obviously our leaders in the faith side know that very, very well, but the rest of us may forget it on a pretty regular basis. Reverend Clark, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for taking part in this. Hopefully we can chat down the road under better circumstances, and I wish you nothing but the best.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for your work, and thank you for including me in it. It's been a real honor. I appreciate it.
We will talk to you soon.
Sounds good.